Riley Gaines is certainly no stranger to controversy, but before she was a conservative firebrand, she was a really fast swimmer. In fact, she was one of the fastest people ever to be in a pool, top 10, I believe. But since she exited the pool, she has added a few more titles to her belt. She is a podcaster, she is an author, she is a conservative commentator, and now, most importantly, she's added the title of wife and mother. Riley Gaines, welcome to Maine and welcome to the Garrett Mason Show. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. Quite the introduction. I refer to myself as a swammer nowadays.
Yeah,
like it is very past tense. Yeah. But hearing you say mom too, like, is still just kind of surreal to me. Yeah. To be able to own and wear that title. Our baby girl is 7 weeks old. Amazing. She's perfect. She's here in Maine. It's her first time in Maine. She, at 7 weeks, this is her 11th state to cross off the list. So she is like a well-traveled little babe.
That's impressive. I remember the first time we took our daughter on a plane. We flew her to California to meet my wife's family. And the fact that you got here in one piece is impressive. So well done.
We're here. Everyone says like now's the time too when they're so little. You know, she's on the plane and she's like passed out. Yeah. It's when they turn, from what I hear, when, you know, they start walking, that's when like all the chaos like really ensues. So far she's been a dream.
Awesome.
Yes.
I have a quote to read to you. At the end of October, you got into a fight with one Miss AOC. And she responded to a post that you put up and said, maybe if you channeled all this anger into swimming, you wouldn't have come in fifth. So I've a couple of things I want to read to the audience here. 12-time NCAA All-American, 5-time SEC champion, qualified for the Olympic trials, set multiple records, which I'm not even going to read all of them. You were named SEC Scholar Athlete of the Year. What frustrates me the most about what she said about you is I don't think people understand what kind of elite athlete you are. And it shows that she probably never played a sport.
Well, that's precisely it. And that's something that's been like a commonality the past few years is the people who come after you or who take the other side of this issue, who say, you know, use the buzzwords like inclusion and empathy and compassion, which have been totally conflated, by the way. When they use these words, especially when we're talking about competitive, elite level sports, like oftentimes it's coming from people who have never played a sport
for sure
in their entire life. So number one, yes, that's what I thought when I read this. Second thing I thought, this is amazing to me because if you were to ask AOC, like she would describe herself as a feminist. So coming after me for my athletic ability, or I guess my lack of athletic ability, or whatever the point she's trying to make, not a good look as someone, again, who represents the party that claims to be of and for women. And the third thing here, when I read this, again, her saying, you know, maybe you should have just swam faster or you wouldn't have placed fifth. That's like the point is going entirely over her head. It never mattered what place I finished. I could have been first. I could have been fifth. I could have been 85th. I could have been 500th. It didn't matter. The point is the man does not belong in the pool. That's the whole point. And so when I look at AOC and her saying this, to be very, very clear, like as clear as it can be, hear me when I say AOC is taking the side of a 6'4" man who flashes women in the locker room as opposed to the women and the girls who merely want to compete fairly and safely.
You know, that's all so true. And Malcolm Gladwell in the book Outliers talks about his 10,000-hour rule, which I know you know all about. And when I've been around professional sports, I worked in professional sports. I'm a horrible athlete, but I worked in the sports. And, you know, I've been around these people and watched them train. And sometimes, and in your case in swimming, this is very true, that there's one race, you know, that's really important. And like you work your whole life for that one singular moment and the 10,000 hours plus that you've put into swimming. Can you talk about your family? I'm familiar with your family and how they're all professional athletes. Like you all kind of came from that. Can you talk about what you sacrificed to get where you got to?
100%. And again, I think this is something that's often lost in this debate is just how much girls, or I'll speak personally, just how much I gave up to be able to compete and succeed at the highest level. I mean, I started swimming when I was 4, graduated when I was 22, so dedicated really 18 years of my life to my sport. I think back to middle school even. I mean, you're 12 years old and you're practicing before school. You go to school, straight from school, you go back to practice again for another 2.5 hours. You go home, you eat your dinner, you do your homework, you ice your shoulder, you go to bed, you wake up, you do it all again the next day. So, there's no prom. You don't get to go to prom with your friends. You don't get to have sleepovers on Friday night because guess what? You have practice at 6 a.m. on Saturday morning. You don't get to go on family vacations because God forbid you took a week out of practice. And then flash forward to college. I thought I worked hard before college. I got to college and it was like my mind was blown. We're practicing from, 6 hours a day with 3 of those hours being before 8 a.m. So from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. again, same thing. You go to class, you come back, you practice again from 1:30 to 4:30. We were training probably 15,000 yards in the pool every single day, which is equivalent to about 10 miles. Looking at the same black line at the bottom of the pool, like certifiably like suffocating ourselves. Like it's the only sport where you like don't get to talk to others. You have to hold your breath. You're like drowning yourself every single day. And I don't say that to, for this big pity party, feel bad for us. Like I was willing to do that. I wanted to do that. I loved doing that. And I knew I had to do those things again, to be as successful as I knew that I was capable of being in my sport. And to speak to my family too, I'm so fortunate to have such a fantastic family who, really my parents, is probably like some form of child abuse now, but they made me play sports and my siblings play sports. And so my mom, she was a D1 softball player. My dad, he's an SEC Hall of Famer. He played football, went on to play with the Eagles. My brother's in college. He played football. My sister went to Ole Miss and she played softball. My youngest sister is 17. She's an elite level gymnast. She'll go on to do incredible things.
Amazing.
And so that foundation that my parents, I think, really instilled in me and my siblings, so much of those skill sets that I am even using now, like in terms of leadership and, setting goals and working to achieve those goals and understanding that something is bigger than just you. A lot of that came from playing sports, which I credit my parents for putting us in them.
And that your family sacrificed a lot. It sacrificed a lot for all of your siblings and you.
Time, it's no surprise now that sports are expensive even too.
Oh, very.
Like you're playing year-round sports at like 8 years old and you're traveling all across the country. So it's a financial investment, it's a time investment, it's an emotional investment for my parents. So absolutely.
So, obviously, you found yourself at the center of a controversy that you didn't start. And, your boldness and your story from that moment with Leah Thomas is incredible. And I think it's well known to the people who are here, but also around the world. Can you take us back to that moment when you finished that race? You found out you're tied. Which a tie in swimming is crazy. I know we're all professional, like swimming viewing, professionals during the Olympics, but swimming isn't something that's followed on TV all the time. But to tie is really rare. So can you bring us back to that just for a minute?
Yeah. When you're racing for 1 minute and 40 seconds and you go the exact same time down to the 100th of a second, I would encourage anyone listening or watching this, like get out your phone, the stopwatch app, try and stop your stopwatch within even 1/10 of a second.
That's a really good point.
Never mind 100th of a second. So the fact that this even happened, I believe it's divine intervention entirely, because it ultimately led to the string of events that happened after that. Because I think had it ended right there, like we tied in the pool, that was it. I'm ashamed to say, truthfully, I'm very self-aware. I'm ashamed to say, had that been the end of it, I think I would have been apt to just sweep it under the rug like everyone else was doing, continue on with the life that I had planned, the plans that I had made for myself, and just, think it's someone else's problem.
Yeah.
The NCAA, surely they would see the fault and the harm in this. They won't let it happen again, and just continue on. But it's not where it ended. That tie ultimately led to us going behind the podium, the NCAA officials saying, look, yes, you tied, but we only have one trophy. We're going to give the trophy to him. Sorry, you just don't get one. You can hold this one. You can pose with it, but you have to give yours back. He takes the trophy home. You go home empty-handed. Like that was the push that kind of sent me over the edge into no longer being willing to wait for someone else. And I remember so vividly, like standing on that podium, holding this trophy I knew I had to give back, sharing my placement with a man standing like, 8-9 inches taller than me. And I just had this realization of, Riley, how can you wait for someone to stand up for you if you're not even willing to stand up for you? This has to come from you all as women, as female athletes.
And I think, the Lord gave you that courage in that time and he obviously wanted to use you for something very special, which he has done. We're at a Maine Girl Dad event, right? And we're here celebrating, 70,000 plus signatures to get the Protect Girls Sport referendum on the ballot, which is, I know, something you have worked for all over the nation, but we're going to do it here in Maine. We're very excited. I can't help but think about the interview that you did with Joe Rogan and talking about your dad and how you called him from the locker room with this guy parading around in the locker room. And you telling him, Dad, there's a guy in here and he's competing. And you encouraged him, like, I don't want you to cause a scene. Can you talk a little bit, not about that conversation, but the one surrounding it with your dad? Because I, as a girl that you met, my little girl, I, as a girl dad, feel like empathy with him. And like, he's your dad. He wants to protect you.
100%. Yeah. Going back to that moment where I think especially when we found out he was in the locker room with us, which we had no forewarning, he would be in that changing space. Like the first time we became aware that we would be undressing next to this 6'4" Goliath of a man who was fully comfortable exposing himself, was when we were inches away from the 6'4" Goliath of a man exposing himself. Yes. Crazy. But I called my dad. I immediately, you're in there, this happens, you like cover yourself instinctually and immediately like throw clothes on, get out of that locker room, because it felt like, voyeurism or indecent exposure or something that, a DA would walk into that locker room and they would have something to charge this man with. But that wasn't the case.
Depending on the DA.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. No, we were the ones who would be charged if we even dared to speak about this. But anyways, I called my dad and I'm like, Dad, he's in here. And he said, Riley, I have a plan. Because, no one is allowed on the pool deck other than the athletes, the coaches, and the officials. No parents, no one from the stands, none of that. And so he said, I have a plan. I'm going to say that I'm your university's bus driver, and I need to get on that pool deck. There's a side door over here. I already have it figured out, picked out which one I want to use. You come let me in, and I'm going to handle this myself. And I said, Dad, which he like absolutely would have, and that would absolutely result, the result would be him in an orange jumpsuit in jail. So I told him, I'm like, Dad, like, I've got this. That was kind of the thought of him doing something. It was enough for me to be like, you know what? I can defend myself. Thank you for, again, the leadership skills that you gave me, teaching me to call out an injustice when I see it, whether it's affecting me or others. I told him, I said, look, we already have one man in the locker room. We don't need to. But it is like the inherent instinctual protective instinct that I don't even believe just a dad, but a man possesses over women. It seems to be, I guess, a lost trait.
Yeah, I think that's true. Now, you call yourself a swammer.
Swammer.
You left the University of Kentucky. Your life is very different than what you planned, and you wanted to be an endodontist, correct?
That's right. Which is a dentist who performs root canals.
Yeah. Very different.
Very far
life.
off the beaten path.
Yeah. You look at that now, and I think sometimes when we talk about college sports, you're in school, you're getting a degree, and that's lost on people. You were the SEC Student Athlete of the Year in 2022. That's an incredible honor, just that you were able to keep your grades up and also swim and deal with the situation that you dealt with. That's incredible. But you have this life now where you're a super public figure, that you're out there all the time. I see you on TV regularly, and you're on our little, slumming it here on our podcast.
Oh, please.
But can you talk about what do you wish that most people could understand about this issue? Like, if you could boil it down to one thing, like, what do you think? Because for me, it's you're taking podium spots away from girls. And I think there's like under 1,000, a little under 1,000 awards that have been given to a man that should have been gone to a woman. And can you like boil down, like, what do you wish that people could understand about how this affects women and girls in their real life?
Well, a couple things. In terms of the messaging here, what I hope people hear is like, we're not coming from a place of being anti whatever, any of the phobias or any of the isms that they will call you for taking this stance. Like, that's not what this is about. Rather than being anti anything, the position that we're taking is one that is pro science.
Yeah.
Right? What happened to like follow the science? It is pro science. It is pro truth. It's pro reality. It is pro safety, pro equal opportunities. It's pro woman. I cannot for the life of me understand how we've reached a point where being pro equality, they love that word, how being for and standing for and advocating for equality is now considered, it makes you a bigot or an extremist or any of the other like hateful buzzwords that they use to try to deter you from this position. Again, and they do it under the guise of like the other side, what they advocate for of saying it's progress, it's progressive, indicating we're moving in the positive forward direction. By putting men into women's spaces or sports, it's deeply regressive and it's utterly misogynistic. So that's what I hope people understand about the messaging. And to your point about how this affects women, it's not just about the trophy, right? I get that criticism all the time of people saying, you just wanted your trophy. That was never about the trophy. Of course, it was the principle behind why they were doing what they were doing, using us as women as, I guess, props to validate the feelings and the identity of a man, telling us that his happiness mattered more than our safety. It mattered more than, our privacy concerns or our opportunities. We had to validate his feelings.
Yeah.
That's why we were there as women. Again, that's deeply regressive. And this is something that transcends party lines. Unfortunately, in the way that it's been portrayed and voted on, amongst elected representation, and certainly how the media portrays this, it makes it seem as if this issue is very 50-50.
Yeah.
Like one half of the country thinks this way and the other half thinks this way. It's just not the case at all.
No.
Some say it's an 80-20 issue. I actually think it's more drastic than that. I would say 90-10, if not even more than that.
Yeah.
Because I truthfully believe, despite the fringe, insane minority that certainly exists, and on both sides, I certainly believe that most people are still sane, most Americans are still sane enough to understand that men cannot become women and vice versa.
You talk about safety, and my daughter loves claw machines. The ones that in the arcades and stuff. And we took her there for her 5th birthday last April, and we were there. We were like the only people there because it was the middle of the day, in April. And I remember I was waiting for my wife and daughter to get out of the bathroom, and there was they came out. We started to walk out. There was a 300-pound man in a dress who did not pass, by the way.
They never really do.
Yeah, they never do. And they walked into the bathroom like within seconds after, my family had come out. And it struck me that like, this is a 300-pound man in the bathroom.
Yeah. What's your wife or daughter going to do?
Exactly. And what if I wasn't there?
Exactly.
We left and they knew why we left, but it's the safety in the space.
And even in sports, like obviously in swimming, we didn't have to worry about, our physical safety while swimming. But in sports like volleyball or softball or any sport where there's, collision or throwing a ball at one another or anything to that effect, like you have to worry about your safety on the court or on the field. I've talked to so many girls, even in this state, who have realized, they get up to the net, it's a volleyball game, they get up to the net, they realize that the opposing team has a boy on, their setter is a boy. We've seen boys give career-ending, concussions and brain injuries to girls on the court. So safety in that regard too. The stats, how much higher boys can jump, how much further they can throw. You look at any sport actually. Let's look at, we're talking about volleyball. Let's look at volleyball. The men's volleyball net is 7.5 inches higher than a women's net. Why? Because there are real biological differences. Same with golf. Why is a men's, where he tees off, why is that however many yards back? Like men and women have different tee spots. What about in softball versus baseball, totally different sports, gymnastics, the events are different. Like you look at any sport and there are, especially again, where there's some sort of collision, throwing, they're different. We never looked at that as like bigoted before, but now apparently
live in an upside down world.
Yes.
But you know, I want to move on to probably like the greatest titles in your life, as we talked about, being a wife and a mom, and you're now have a 7-week-old little baby girl. And, you know, when you look at them, has this being a girl mom, has this kind of ignited a new fire within you? Has it made you, has it made your passion and your drive more intense about this issue?
Well, it just shifts your perspective entirely. I think
everything.
on literally everything. I think prior to this, obviously I had my own experience, and me and my teammates and you know, other Division I swimmers around the country were directly and negatively impacted. And so that's how I approach this issue, is it affected me. But now having a little daughter, that's my concern. Her, the world that she grows up in, the country that she inherits, and a younger sister too, you know, who, as I said, she's 17. She'll go on to do great things. How could I look at myself in the mirror going through what we did, experiencing what we did, and not fight for my younger sister and now my daughter? You know, like it was almost feelings of, prior to speaking out, it was almost feelings of like guilt and conviction and total responsibility on their behalf.
Yeah.
So for sure, it shifts your perspective. And I don't think there's few things like scarier than like a mad mama bear, which I can kind of classify myself as now.
I can tell you that my wife, the passion and drive she has to protect our daughter from everything is unmatched. And
right.
I think it just unlocks in moms and dads too, but like moms specifically.
Totally.
Now, is there a story that sticks out to you about a girl anywhere that you've seen have an injustice committed upon them? Is there a story that you carry with you that is important?
Gosh, I could think of 100. Again, in states, not just blue states, but states all across the nation. On the topic of safety, when discussing that, there's a girl in North Carolina who, high school volleyball player. I believe she's in Murphy, North Carolina, so close to the Tennessee border. Volleyball game, boy on the other team jumps up, spikes the ball, hits her in the face. Immediately she's knocked unconscious, where she lays for many, many minutes before finally coming back around. This was in September of 2022. So gosh, over 3 years now. Still to this day, her name's Peyton. She's partially paralyzed on her right side. Her vision is impaired. Her memory is impaired. She has to have special accommodations for testing at school because she can't retain information like she once could. She was supposed to play softball in college. That ended her, not just her volleyball season, it ended her athletic career altogether. I could tell you more stories of concussions, or in Massachusetts where in field hockey, there's a boy who, you know, slaps a shot at a girl and hits her in the face. She had to have, all her teeth were knocked out. She had to undergo facial reconstruction surgery to reconstruct her jaw and her smile.
That would happen anyways, even with girls. Field
exactly.
hockey's rough. With a boy?
Now put a boy on the field.
That's crazy.
So in terms of safety, things like that. But the stories that really like stick with me, and I have young girls reach out like virtually every day and kind of fill me in on what's going on. Most recently, I was in Michigan. There's a state championship, again, in the sport of volleyball, weirdly enough, where Skyline High School has a boy on their team. Girls would reach out to me and they say, you know, what about us? What about me? Like, do we not deserve fairness? What are we supposed to do? And it's such a heartbreaking scenario because think about the impossible burden that is to bear. You know, you're talking about 15-year-old girls and they're left to make a decision like, do I step onto that court? Do I risk my safety? Or do I not, you know, ultimately not being able to play the sport that I love? Yeah. Think of how many people had to fail those young girls for that to be put on their shoulders.
Amount.
Yeah.
A line of adults.
A line of adults. And it's so true. It's not just the NCAA or the, you know, Michigan High School Athletic Association or the Biden administration or the Democratic Party. Like there are so many fingers you could point that ultimately led those girls to where they are.
Courage is a habit and it's a muscle.
That's it.
And you got to train it.
That's
and
it.
That's certainly the case. I got to bring it to Maine before we wrap it up because you got a busy day ahead of you. I remember watching you with Representative Laurel Libby at the Department of Justice with Pam Bondi, and she was censured in the Maine House of Representatives, only the fourth censure in state history, by the way. And when she stood up for girls in indoor track and field, wasn't allowed to vote for her constituents for the better part of 5 months, until she apologized to the House. And that was obviously not going to happen with Representative Libby. Governor Mills
She rocks.
openly, she's done incredible work on this. Governor Mills openly defying President Trump, saying she was not going to enforce Title IX. I mean, Maine's a little state, but man, we have a loud voice in some places. You are no stranger to Maine. You testified on Representative Liz Caruso's bill in the legislature, and now here we are celebrating that the people of Maine are going to have a choice. They're going to have a choice in November 2026. Can you talk about what this means for your work, but also what it means for Maine and girls, and just what a tremendous accomplishment this is to get 70,000 people to stand up for common sense and put their name on the line?
100%. First and foremost, think of how many people, 70,000. I mean, that's a really big number, even still not enough. With the margin of error and different things. So hopefully going to have much more than 70,000. But think of how many people that is. How many normal, everyday Mainers. You call yourself a Mainer?
We call ourselves Mainers.
How many normal, everyday, common sense Mainers understand that this is, again, it's harmful and it's destructive and it's antithetical to Title IX and to why women's sports, women's spaces were created in the first place. Representative Libby, Liz Caruso, fantastic warriors for truth, for women, for common sense. Really, really appreciative of everything that they've done, especially Laurel Libby. Gosh, I remember watching the visual, truthfully, of the censure and like when it happened. And you have the male speaker who's standing above and this very strong, firm stature. And you have Laurel Libby who's down there like this little tiny petite woman. That visual was so indicative, for me at least, of precisely what this issue is about. Again, a female representative was censured for advocating for girls and women. Didn't happen in England, didn't happen in Afghanistan. No, this happened right here in America. That's a pretty terrifying thought. So very grateful for both of those people. And yeah, Governor Mills, she thought she had this like mic drop moment where she told President Trump, like, I'll see you in court. And he's like, okay, yeah, you will.
Yeah.
So not her best look. Look, what's happening here in Maine? First, let's set the scope of what's happened nationally. We've seen 27 states ultimately pass some sort of fairness in women's sports law, preventing boys from competing in girls' sports and vice versa. We've seen 17 states now ultimately define the word woman in law. Maine, despite valiant efforts from that of people like Laurel Libby and Liz Caruso, has not been able to get this done. So what do? We give the people a voice, which is ironic because that's what those representatives are elected to do, yet they're failing miserably. We're giving a voice back to the people by this ballot referendum initiative effort. So to you Mainers, I believe you will have a choice at the ballot box very soon. Do you believe that girls are worthy of calling themselves champions? Yes or no? If your answer is yes, you will vote that you support this. Do you believe that women are worthy to undress in privacy without men watching them? If your answer is yes, then you'll support this initiative. Do you believe that women and men are inherently and biologically different, not in a way that makes women inferior, but in a way really that's beautiful and like complementary of one another? If you say yes, then you will support this at the ballot.
That's right. The
people have a choice. And I would imagine that their voices will be heard and they will be on the right side of history.
If you had to give one piece of advice to a girl here in Maine that might be facing some of the things that you faced in the pool in 2021, what advice would you give them?
It's to use your voice. I think initially when, again, I was in this situation, which I was like a 21-year-old college woman. Like I was an adult at this point, but even still I felt so hopeless. So I can't even imagine being, a young girl in middle school, high school, having to deal with this and the pressure that you must feel and the self-censorship that you put on yourself because you're fearful. You're fearful to use your voice or to speak out because of all of the different things that they tell you will happen. You'll lose your friends, all these horrible things that are really scary and understandably so. I'm here to tell you that none of those things happened to me. Didn't lose any friends. It's not to say I don't have friends who disagree with me. Of course I do, but they know me and they know my heart and they know where I'm coming from on this issue. And if you do lose friends, were they really a friend that you wanted anyways? They told me I'll never get a job. Guess what? I've only had opportunities that have happened from this. So don't believe any of the
Not according to AOC though.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't have a job, which is really ironic considering when she wrote that during all the government shutdown, she was the one who didn't have a job.
That's
so
right.
Whatever, AOC. Yeah. It's only been opportunities. So all that to say, I think you will be rewarded fruitfully and abundantly for being courageous. I think you'll understand very quickly that courage is in fact contagious. It sounds cliche, but it's true. You being willing and able to use your voice can inspire 3 more people. And guess what? Those 3 people then respectfully inspire 3 more people. So It really is this trickle effect. There's strength in numbers. Be that person that someone else can look up to. And I think you'll find it to be impactful and influential.
Riley Gaines, thank you for coming to Maine. RileyGaines.com, right?
Yes.
You can buy Riley's book. You can listen to her podcast, Games with Girls. And thank you for your advocacy. Thank you for standing up for girls.
I appreciate you guys and finally giving us an answer to the question of where are the men?
Yeah.
They're all right here in Maine.
Right here.
They're right here.
Yeah.
So thank you.
No, thank you, Riley, so much. And thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate this opportunity to interview Riley. I hope you enjoyed what she had to say. Please go on to youtube.com, subscribe, all the socials, everything, and make sure that you visit RileyGaines.com. You can buy her book there. You can listen to her podcast. And we're just so appreciative of the work and advocacy that she's done, not only for girls across the country, but right here in Maine on the Protect Girls Sport referendum. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.